What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
John Chambers, it's great to have you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Ryan, it's going to be a pleasure. We're going to have a great session. I'll try not to disappoint you.
Oh, man. Well, I have high expectations, and you already know that because we've talked a little bit. I want to start, though, John. There are so many different places where we could go, but I want to start when you were 6 years old. You went on a fishing trip with your dad. And I'd love for you to tell this story and what you learned that day and how your dad impacted you as far as the events of that day.
Well, my dad, throughout my whole life, and I lost him about 1.5 years ago, was my best friend. He knew when he needed to be a dad, and he knew when he needed to be a friend on it. And he was constantly teaching. Often I didn't even realize that he was teaching at the time. We were fishing together in Elk River in West Virginia, and we were fishing in a pretty rapid area, which is where, unfortunately, when you read about people losing their lives in rivers or in raft trips, it's often in the rapids with the tough rocks, etc. And my dad trusted me, and I was a strong swimmer for 6 years old, but there's no way I could have ever swam in those currents or even handled it. And so he said, now, as we fish, I want you to stay up on the bank. Don't get near the edge, because if you get swept in, it could be really dangerous. And we had been fishing for about a half an hour, and he was working his way upriver. And what did I do? Curiosity got the best of me, Ryan. I slipped off the rock. I was in the water, and I started to panic. And I was getting just plummeted across the rocks and getting bruised, and the current was really fast. And for a second, I thought I might die. And all of a sudden, I looked up, and my dad was coming down the side of the river as fast as he could run on the rocks, yelling, "Hold on to the fishing pole. Hold on to the fishing pole." It was an ugly fishing pole, Ryan. It couldn't have cost $5, black, a casting type reel, etc. But obviously, if he was worried about me losing the reel, I was in no danger. And so I grabbed a hold of that reel with both hands and rod. And every time I surfaced, I got a breath of air, and I could see him running down the bank trying to catch up. And I'd go back underwater, etc. And then it got down to an area where it slowed a little bit. He swam out, got me, set me down on the bank, and made sure I was all right. And then he walked me through what he just taught me. He said, "Do you know why I told you to hold on to the fishing pole?" And I had no idea. And he said, when you get into real trouble in business, in life, he didn't use the word business at that time, in sports or school or whatever, or with the river here, you've got to be very careful not to let panic set in. And you can't say just be calm. You've got to be able to focus on what you can control and influence. And then you've got to deal with the situation. You've got to size how serious it is. And then you've got to be able to work your way, quote, into calmer waters. And he said that was pretty dangerous. And your mom's going to kill me when I tell her what happened. But he said, this is how you do it. And I said, I think I've got it. He said, are you comfortable? I said, yes, I am. He put me back in the water, and down the rapids I went again.
Really?
Yeah. And he walked along the side of the bank this time, but I did exactly what he said. I got calm. I put my feet out in front of me in the rapids, because that way you could hit off the rocks with your feet. And when you get pummeled, I didn't panic. You just came back up, more air. And then I waited till I found a slow spot where I could swim out. And I had that lesson in life forever. And it was one of the best teaching moments about dealing with stress, dealing with crisis management, and being realistic that there will be a tendency in all of us, no matter how brave you think you are, to panic. And that's what gets you into trouble. A parallel story is 12 years later. One of my sisters, younger sisters, had a friend drowned in that river. And it was an open casket, memorial, and she was hesitant about going by herself. And she said, "John, would you come with me?" And I said, "Of course." And I had no idea about the young man. And as we went there, she went up to the front to pay her respects to the young man and the family who had passed. And all of a sudden, people parted, and I looked, and the guy looked almost identical to me.
Mm.
And it turned out he drowned in the exact spot I was. But he was older at that time, probably 14 or 15, a strong swimmer, as it turned out, and a very good athlete on it. But he drowned, in my opinion, because nobody was there to tell him to hold on to the fishing pole. And
Mm.
so very often life goes full circles in terms of the lessons it teaches you.
Wow. I didn't know that second part of the story. That's incredible, John. We've come through a year of people are more fearful of uncertainty than maybe anything else in the world. We can deal with bad stuff if we have an idea of when it's going to end, or we know we got to just suck it up for a week or two, or even a year in some cases. The uncertainty brings about fear. And I have to imagine you've gone through a lot of uncertainty and fear and tough moments in your life as a leader. Certainly last year was one of those in a different capacity now. What are some of the actionable takeaways someone could take who is still dealing with fear and that uncertainty of not fully knowing when something may end? That's really hard.
Well, it's a whole bunch of teaching moments, Ryan, and I know what you're doing in terms of setting me up for the question. Let me go down a couple of the paths.
Hmm.
The first path is that I was very fortunate that I had two parents who were doctors, and Dad delivered 6,000 babies, 25% of them for free. It's his way of giving back to people less fortunate. And Mom was internal medicine and psychiatry. Nice way of saying when we broke, they could put us back together. But they taught myself and my two sisters from the very beginning that don't waste a lot of cycles on things you cannot change. It both will send you into a spiral. It is tremendously frustrating. And they said, while it's important to understand how you got to where you are today, don't spend a lot of time wishing it was different. Always focus on the future and deal with the world the way it is, not the way you wish it was. Now, those are lessons all people that are listening have heard before, but it's putting it together with the doctor background and the practicality that is my base for my value system and what I try to do. And don't misunderstand me, I've made lots of mistakes. In terms of dealing with stress, I'm going to go down a path that might surprise you. I deliberately put my leaders under stress. If they aren't under stress, I put them under it because you learn more about a person under stress than you do any other time. Very often, people walk the talk when there's no stress, but the minute it gets hard, they deviate in ways that surprise you. And so, whether it's an interview, I tell the interviewee that during the next hour, I'm going to absolutely ask you some tough questions. I'm going to apologize for that, but I'm going to put you under stress. And the minute I know you're comfortable with an answer, I'm going to change you again. Under stress, you learn what people are really like. With leaders, when they start to struggle, and I'm a coach, I've got to decide, when do I let them struggle and find their way to the bank of the river? Or when do I need to coach them more actively? Or when do I jump in and pull them out? And it's a very effective way of leading, in my opinion, because I develop my teams and I teach them how to deal with stress and the approach. Third, you can't keep people under stress too long. When that happens, it's exactly what happened this last year with COVID. When you're under stress for too long, you begin to make bad decisions. You begin to overthink issues. You begin to second guess yourself. It's like you're driving along and somebody flashes you the bird and you say, what's wrong with that person? But if you've just had a bad day, you've made several mistakes, you're going along and somebody flashes you the bird, you say, what did I do wrong? And things of that type. And so it's teaching people how to deal with that. And I only coach leaders who want to be coached, who want to enjoy that learning experience. And then I add humor, Ryan, because humor relaxes us all, usually about myself. But I enjoy telling a young CEO or young first line manager that here's the situation. It is as tough as you think. We discuss the options. And again, my job isn't to tell them what to do, it's to teach them. And then as long as they think through it, I'm happy with whatever path they choose, and I'll help them get out of the trouble if they take a path that probably wasn't as wise. But then I let them execute. And I tease them by saying, you're going to have a tough time with this. You're going to think about it all weekend long. You're going to deal with the customer situation, the employee situation on Monday. You're going to toss and turn, et cetera. And I'm going to go home and have a margarita and have fun with this. But what I'm doing is teach them, how do you navigate through it? So those are the three of the paths that you gave me a chance to go down. We could probably do 2 or 3 more off of that, but I'll stop there.
Well, I want to get into some of the nuts and bolts of your career a lot, John. A lot of people listening and myself, my own curiosity, we're building something, building our career, building ourselves, trying to become more effective leaders in order to help others and to build teams and effective careers. You became the CEO of Cisco in 1995, correct?
Yes, joined Cisco January of 91 with a commitment to be the CEO unless I messed it up.
Gotcha. Okay. Was the company at $70 million in annual revenues at the time?
At 91, yes, it was.
And when your time as CEO ended a few years ago, 40 billion in annual revenue, is that correct?
About 48 billion.
That's insane.
I know numbers. I'm not good.
That's insane. But okay, so
once I see them, I can memorize them.
I love it. I mean, that the growth is hard to even fathom. But let's start back at the beginning, because and maybe something that's a little bit different. I'm curious as to how you got that job. What led up to you earning the position as CEO of Cisco, or getting hired by them initially, so that you wouldn't screw it up, so that you could become CEO? But because there's a lot of people that are there, and it just seemed to be a lot of emails I received that are building through their own career, trying to get promoted, go for big jobs, and they're asking, like, how do I do this, or what do I do? And so I'd love to hear the actual story behind your career arc and to eventually earning that job, and then we'll dig into some parts of that job.
Okay, part of it will not be a surprise to your audience, so I'll cover that very quickly. Part of it might be a chance to maybe experience your question in a different way. My parents both were doctors, as I said earlier, and they taught me the equalizer in life was education. And so it wasn't a discussion about were we going to go to college. It was how many advanced degrees do you get? And I was a professional student, a gym rat in many ways, 3 degrees, 9.5 years in education. And it was a great base. And then IBM gave me a good base in education because they trained their people remarkably well, even the very entry-level positions. In terms of approaches, I had a general view of where I wanted to go. And I always was thinking 3, 5, 10 years out. My dad taught me that. Most people think 1 or 2 moves on a chessboard at a time. I've already played out the whole chess game in my head, forward, backwards, which options are, et cetera, like a duplicate bridge game for those that play bridge in this listening audience, and the alternatives off of it. So I love going through the scenarios. So those are basic moments that I think there are a lot of books written on, et cetera, that will not be a surprise to people. The way I got the job at Cisco, backing into it through a couple stories, was very unique. I'll give you the cliff notes, and then if you want, I can fill in the elements. When I decided to leave Wang Laboratories, and I left like most reasons, everybody says that you leave a job for the next promotion, better opportunities, more money. The number one reason a person leaves their job is the immediate manager. And that was my case at Wang as well.
You didn't like your manager?
He replaced Dr. Wang, and Dr. Wang was somebody I had huge respect for, the smartest man I've ever met in my life. And his replacement was very tough and didn't treat people well, and made commitments to me that he didn't deliver on. And I knew it was time to leave. And we'd been resizing the company for the year in front of that. Every holiday, I was going through the next downsizing, and I hated it. But I kept the loyalty of my team. I never lost any of my team as we went through the downsizing, even though we were letting people at that time, extended family members go. But I left for that reason, and I sent out my resumes, sent out about 100, and I waited for the orders to come back in terms of jobs. And because I was a pretty good salesperson, and I didn't miss my numbers.
So
And
what was your job at Wang? What were you doing there?
I was at that time a senior VP over top all of the U.S. I'd already ran half the international operation, all the way through in many regions within the U.S.
And you resigned prior to having another job?
Before I ever took an interview.
Wow.
I didn't think that I could be laying people off, telling them to trust the direction of the company, but we have to right size our expenses and trust me on my judgment, and then me out looking for a job at the same time. It's just something ethically I didn't feel that I could do. However, I don't recommend that, because getting a job when you don't have a job is much harder than getting a job when you have it. But it was right for me, and it was a rude awakening that when I turned to my wife and said, I may not be able to get a good job. And it just never occurred to me that would ever happen, because I was reasonably good at what I did in terms of sales and sales management. And then I started the hard process of building networks with friends that I'd met before, letting them know where I was, asking them for help. And anybody that's ever been unemployed will help another person if they can. And it's a lonely feeling, but you know what it's like. And often it's not the person that might be the most powerful or the most influential. It comes sometimes from people like that, but often from somebody that you wouldn't anticipate. Long story short, 90 days later, I had 22 job offers either in hand or well into process. And 21 of those came entirely through networks and friends opening doors. And I would have never got the job at Cisco, except in Silicon Valley, it's a remarkably networked community. And the venture capitalist who was the primary backer of Cisco, a guy by the name of Don Valentine, tough guy, but unbelievably talented, from Sequoia, he did an interview with me. And he basically said, why do you think you can do the job? And then secondly, he said, John, let me tell you why you shouldn't take your other offers you had in the Valley. I didn't even know he knew my other offers. He knew them all. And it was humbling on that. But I decided on Cisco and the job because it really was going to stretch my talent. I didn't tell him that, but he probably knew it anyhow. And the concept of the internet was so new. I mean, they were mistaking Cisco trucks for food service delivery trucks on it. And so I jumped into it. But the last element of the story is the search firm who had the search for Cisco was never going to present me, because they'd made the mistake of presenting me to 3 other accounts, all 3 of which gave me offers, which is a no-no in the search business, as you know. And so there no way they were going to give me that opportunity. And they said at that time that they didn't think I was a valid candidate when they were reviewing the candidates with the Cisco group. It turned out one person at Cisco had been in a similar career path to mine at IBM and then at Wang, and he got into a little bit of trouble on politics, not ethical or any competency, but on politics, and I helped him through it. And I never thought I'd see the guy again. And I came back from a grueling week of interviewing on and trying to decide which company I'd recommend to my wife that we take the job on in California. And unfortunately, it meant we were going to have to move from the East Coast. And I came in carrying these big, heavy bags. And my wife said, I've got your job. I said, what? She said, I've got your job. remember this guy, Terry? And I said, yeah. He said, you belong at the CEO of Cisco. It's the hottest company going. And I agree with him. And here's the phone number, and you got to give him a call. And that's how I ended up there. How you treat people throughout your career determines your brand. Your currency is purely track record, relationships, and trust. And while I'm far from perfect, I build unbelievably deep relationships with extremely powerful people and with the bellman at a hotel or the person who parks cars. And I get to build those, and I learn from everybody in terms of it. But it's how you keep relationships and how you build those often indicates what you're able to do in life and how do you move forward.
Where does that come from? This care for others. I've sensed it even before we hit record, and the curiosity and care you bring to today. You're not just showing up and winging it. It's obvious you and your team have prepared, and that speaks volumes to me about your character and the type of person you are, where you could easily pop on Zoom, wing it, and crush it. And you don't do that. Like it means too much to you, I sense, to
Yes.
actually try your best to make this as good as it could possibly be. And obviously, to me, that means everything. And I love you for it. But I mean, where does this, is this from your upbringing, or just the way you are, or a person that really impacted you to say relationships and building meaningful, mutually beneficial, trying to help other people? Like that is what that life is all about. I sense that about you.
Well, it's thank you for the kind words. And as you said before, I have lots of weaknesses. My wife or my team that prepared us for this will tell you those. First, a comment, of course, and then I come right back to your question, is that I'm usually the best prepared for every meeting I go into. And I used to think that was bureaucracy, and boy, was I wrong. I would do 8 to 15 Zoom sessions, Google Meets, whatever, per day, and I'm the best prepared in every one of those sessions for the session. It allows you to move with tremendous speed. We could talk about that preparation and acquisitions or something else later. Back to where it came from. My dad taught me to think 5, 10, 15 years out. He could see trends in West Virginia. He knew our state was in trouble, even though we were the chemical center and the coal center of the world as I was growing up. And he prepared all of us for leaving the state. And we didn't realize that he was actually brainwashing us and approaching it that way. But both of my sisters are married to CEOs, and it was the vision there, but the emotional connection came from mom. She was a psychiatrist as well as internal medicine. She broke a lot of the gender barriers. And remember, this is over 100 years ago as she was growing up. And she was an athlete at the time. The women were an athlete. She was a lifeguard, lacrosse player, ping pong champion, ballroom dancer, and valedictorian of every class she went through. But she taught me to connect with people. And I know it sounds basic, but as growing up, she would never let me go to bed mad at night. And if she had to sit in the chair beside the bed and talk to me all the way, even up to high school, which I haven't shared with people before, she would walk me through it. I knew what she was doing, but she would get me to stay focused and emotionally connect and to not go to sleep angry with somebody because all those implications are wrong. I'm dyslexic, and I used to view that as a huge weakness, and I never talked about it until I accidentally disclosed it to take our children to work day. But once you have been laughed at in class because you can't read, once you struggle and the fear that comes at you as they go down that row of students and have each student read a paragraph, and I know it's coming to me and I know I'm going to mess it up, and that fear starts to build, which of course makes it even worse as you start to execute. You never laugh at anybody else. I have never laughed at somebody else's mistakes. Uh, I make a lot of myself. I can laugh at my own mistakes, and that's important to learn how to do in terms of the direction. But I never raised my voice once in all the times I was at Cisco. I didn't need to. Now, don't misunderstand. I had high expectations of my team, and boy, they knew it. and they knew I expected them to deliver on it. The third element is this was something I didn't understand, but I love building teams, and I build extended family teams. That's not for everyone. Cisco was an extended family. I knew every illness of every employee, their spouse, their children. We were there for them to do whatever they needed. And by the way, two of the current Cisco employees that had major health issues with their children, both of them called me this last week, and I helped both of them get to the right doctors and the right experience. I did it because it was right. That's what my parents taught me. But what I realized, it allowed me to build great teams who were families. And boy, you don't beat a family if you get the right talent as well. Now, that's not for everyone. Netflix, I mean, their CEO, amazing leader, but they're a professional team. It's up or out. You've got to earn your position every year. And they encourage you to look for other offers and do it. The cultures are different, but my culture is one of extended family, and that's what I look for in the companies that I acquire. The benefit, my attrition rate at Cisco for the 20 years I was there was only 5% per year voluntary. In a market that averaged 15, and every employee, including myself, could go work for someplace else for a lot more money anytime they wanted on it. And so it is that extended family that resonates with a certain percentage of the workforce, not with all. And there are a lot of people that believe your career is 2 years, one job, 2 years, next job, 2 years, next job. And by the way, that works, but it's not the way I run business. And so we built a team, and we were unbeatable. We weren't arrogant, but boy, you took us all on. We had the top customer satisfaction in the whole high-tech industry. We had the top channel satisfaction in the whole high-tech industry. And I kept my leaders. I think over 20 years, I might have lost 5 out of my top 200 leaders in total during that time. And a number of them, by the way, resigned at one point in time, and I brought them back. As long as they didn't resign twice, that was acceptable. And so a lot of teaching moments on that, but that gives you a little bit of flavor for where it came from.
I know too that Jack Welch and you have a relationship, and he's had a big impact on you. I don't know if everything you just said fully aligns with some of what Jack is known for in the market, which is interesting to me. What are some of the key... Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I got it. I know where you're going. We can finish each other's sentences, right?
Well, I love it. I'm curious, like, what are some of the key things you learned from Jack, and maybe some things that how you're different from him?
Okay. Great question. I've had the question several times, but never the last piece of that, which is fascinating and important to know. Jack Welch, in my opinion, was the best business leader in the world in the generation in front of me. And he built an amazing company in GE. And I learned a number of lessons from him, but I learned the lessons indirectly because he didn't understand technology. And he had his team come out and benchmark Cisco. And they benchmark companies all the time. And this is always be in mode of disrupt, or you're going to get disrupting. Always be in the mode of constant learning and moving forward. And his sessions with his management were legendary, and they were tough. But when they go benchmark a company, if they got one idea, it was very good. If they got 2, it was great. They benchmarked Cisco, they got 22 ideas from us. So first thing is, he hadn't seen that before. That's clearly a market transition. We closed our books in 24 hours 20 years ago. Most companies can't do it in a week, even now. And he learned, he knew what he knew, and he knew what he didn't. And he was fascinated to constantly learn. And I taught classes at Crotonville, and I watched him on his leadership team. Lessons learned, number 1 or number 2, or don't compete. Sounds really tough, but boy, that's my hurdle. We did it in 18 product areas at Cisco, number 1 and 12, number 2 and 4, and number 3 and 2 on it. That's never been done in high tech before, but we did it by changing the rules. We did it by internal development, acquisition, strategic partnerships, and a drive, number 1 and number 2. It was a given that's what we expected in the implementation. So setting stretch goals are part of it. Secondly, Jack was as good at quarterly business reviews as anyone in the world, and they were brutal. And boy, if he found a chink in your armor, he would cut that armor open, reach in there, grab your heart in front of everybody, take it out, squeeze it a couple of times, put it back in, and you learned how to be good and tough and prepared with him. Third, I would sit around with his leadership team, and I'm pretty flexible in adjusting to different styles and different approaches, and they would be discussing a person in their career and what they thought of them. And boy, it would get hot. And they'd get all the issues out on the table and they'd argue back and forth. And I was ready to get up and go get a drink. And then they decided and they'd agree on what the decision was. And then it was like they were best friends again. The ability to get tough issues out on the table and not sugarcoat it and to argue back and forth, because usually your decision is a combination of the people influencing it, where everybody sees it from a different angle, and you make a better decision if you get out on it. Now, what are we not alike? He was tough on people, really tough, and it was a tough culture. A lot of people would say at that point in GE, it wasn't a question, would you get fired? It was when you were going to get fired. And that expectations were high and they paid people well. And his competitive differentiation was both his drive, but that one or two or don't compete. And he trained the best leaders in the world. So I learned about training leaders. But my involuntary attrition was always low, probably too low, not a Google where they address the bottom 10% of the organization every year. I shot for 5, we achieved 3, and even that made me a little bit uncomfortable on it. Secondly, once I find somebody's weakness, I try not to embarrass them publicly in front of their peers. Once it's become obvious they misstepped, I make sure they know they misstepped, and then I praise in public as much as I can and criticize in private. So I will pull the person over and coach them later about, I think you made a mistake in this quarterly business review on it. But the major thing on leadership for all of your listeners is you've got to be consistent and predictable. Your team will adjust to your style. What they can adjust to is when you're putting your arm around them one day and saying good things, and then the next day saying, I want to be firing you on it. You've got to be predictable in your style and they will adjust. And this is where, I don't know if we're going to get there or not, Ryan, but culture and values is as important to a company or leader's success as strategy and vision. And that I didn't understand as a young leader. In fact, I would argue culture and values trump strategy and vision, especially during tough times like what we just went through this last year.
Well, let's go there right now, John. I think it's a good time because one of the I think you're hinting at the responsibilities of a CEO and the responsibilities of leaders in general. Can you share those few key responsibilities and why and when you learned that culture and values are more important than strategy and vision? They're all important, but you actually have a priority list in order of where you would focus on first.
I do.
Yeah.
And where you're leading me is back to a playbook type of approach. It's like a professional sports team or a college team. Everybody knows the plays. They know where they're supposed to go, what rhythm you run it, who passes the ball to who first, what's the number of expectations, knows that if the Warriors pass the ball 130 times or more in a game, they win 95% of their games. When they're below 130, they lose a disproportionate number of games. So understanding and then correlating to your team why the values and strategies are on it. When you acquire 180 companies in an industry, which very few companies ever do, and you have the highest hit rate in the industry, it isn't that you're smarter. It's you developed a playbook that worked for you, that allowed you to move with tremendous speed, and you understood what you're acquiring and you understood how to execute through it. I carry that over to my startups today. And when I look, people say, well, John, you've got 4 companies that are unicorns and you've got 6 to 8 that can be in the next 2 to 3 years. No pressure on the CEOs who are going to listen to this on the team, but that's what I expect of you. That's when you create jobs and the future on it. What do you look for first in the company? And then to your question, Ryan, if I may, what do you look for in the leader? What I look for in the company is very similar to what I would look for in an acquisition and why I joined Cisco. I look for a market that is in transition enabled by new technology. And remember, every person in this, your listening audience, your company will be a technology company in the future, whether you're in healthcare, whether you're in education, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in technology. The digital world is coming at us with tremendous speed, and it will offer tremendous opportunities to disrupt others or get disrupted yourself. So I look for a company that has a business model change like Amazon did, enabled by the internet. And that's really what Jeff Bezos did remarkably well with the technology. Second thing I look for is the CEO and the founding leadership team. There's just no substitute for a CEO who wants she or he to be coached, who knows what they know and knows what they don't, and really grasp the impact of it. Then I look at the company. Do they have the chance to be one or two in their industry, even though there might only be 40 people? But I'm pretty good at connecting the dots and connecting the strategy, the vision, and the talent to what's possible on it. And then there was only one Steve Jobs. You know, he just somehow knew what to build and respected very much his skill sets. But it still took him 7 years. I shortcutted it. I go straight to customers. If I like a company or I like a product, I go, then tell me your top customers. I'll usually know a couple of them. That goes back to relationships and track record and trust with them. And I say, what do you really think of this company? And should I invest in them or should I buy them? Back at Cisco days. And the customers will almost always tell me what I needed to do in terms of the direction on it. And then I try to catch them within 1 to 2 years of an inflection point. My skills, Ryan, are in skill and growth, culture, building organizations. I love doing it. Can I play defense? Yes, but I don't like it. I'd much rather play offense on it. So that's what I look for in the companies. In the leaders, this is the checklist. If somebody said, I'm interviewing with you, John, where are you going to go to determine if I'm a match? Both what I'm looking for, but also how I measure my leaders are identical. So the interview process matches with how I'd give a person a review a year later. Then I never get hard work confused with results. And that's important, especially if you like somebody and they're working hard. There's a tendency to actually probably make bad business decisions rather than holding them accountable versus the same accountability your peers. So I look for people with track record of overachieving. The second thing I look for is how strong are their teams. You can be a great leader, but this goes to where you were probing earlier in our early conversation about what's the difference between leading an individual and leading managers or all-stars. It's a lot of difference. So I look at how good does a person really build a team and how good are they at leading that team. So I rank my leaders by the quality of team they build. The third thing I look for is a cultural match. My mistakes are often made when I hire somebody into a company that doesn't match the culture or values of the company. Or put differently, if the leader's job is to teach others and to truly lead as opposed to manage others, then they're going to watch to see if you walk the talk. Do you treat people with respect? Do you really put customers first? I mean, everybody says they do. Most people do not on it. It's easy to find out in Q&As with a little bit of stress, do the people put customers first or not? Like you do with your listening audience. They were the first thing you told me. You said, here's where my audience is. Here's what I think they would value from our interchange. Then I look, do they understand the industry? And something that is very important for all of you listening, you've got to understand technology and digitization. It doesn't mean you have to be a programmer. I disagree with that completely. But you've got to understand how do you enable technology to get business results. And regardless of what industry you are in or going to go in, or your children who are going to college are going to go into, you've got to have a basic knowledge of the industry and technology that combines with it. And so those are probably the top 5 things I look for and top 5 things that I value people on when I do a review.
Wow. It's a masterclass. Okay. Some leaders listening, I've worked at, this has happened to me personally. And so I know it's happened to others where they farm out culture to the HR leader. And maybe the HR leader is awesome. They're great. But this, in my opinion, and I believe it's yours, the culture must be owned at the top. The leaders has to take control and realize that is priority one for them, not say, hey, will you go work on all the soft stuff over there and make sure these people are happy? You know, I've been in meetings where that's literally been said. So talk to me about why that is misguided. At least I think it is. If you disagree, feel free to tell me.
I will disagree.
What's that? Okay. So why does culture need to be owned at the top and not something to ever be farmed out to an HR leader or somebody else?
Well, when you think about it, this answer could be definitely true of culture, but also true of innovation and also true of your digital company. There's nothing worse than saying somebody, you're the chief innovation officer, or you're the chief digitization officer, or you're the head cultural person. I like the HR person being called senior VP of culture, but the CEO, she or he has to own it. And you've got to walk the talk and you've got to drive it through. You never have a great company without an unusually strong culture. You may or may not like the culture at a Microsoft or a Google or a Facebook or an Oracle or a Cisco or a Bank of America or a JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, but they're unbelievably strong. And that is as important, as we said earlier, strategy and vision. The CEO should, in every session you do, but if you're a first line manager, the same thing is your company's culture is set by your leader, but you should in every meeting take at least one teaching moment to take an element of the values or culture, whether it's customer first or treating people with respect. And by the way, they aren't the same cultures. The cultures are different as night and day, but you ought to do that and reinforce in every meeting or every speech a leader does or interaction on Q&As with the employees, work one or two comments in about culture and balance on it.
So use pause, like use an example.
Yes.
Where point out that someone in your organization is living the values of your business. So
exactly.
You mean you're pointing it out and like sharing
first. They didn't ask for permission. They jumped on a plane, got the parts out of inventory, went over, fixed the company issue. Even if the CFO chewed them out on how much they paid for the plane or the plane ticket, I'd always defend them and say, you probably could have got a better price, but you did what was right for the customer. You tell the war stories, Ryan, which you're good at. People will remember the war stories you and I cover today. They won't remember the Cliff Note. And so you tell those stories. You tell the story about a life that you saved where the young rep, and she was amazingly good. She got a cancer and all of her doctors told her to prepare to die. And she was at great universities, hospitals and stuff. And it's incurable. And she called me and I didn't know her. And she said, John, here's my prognosis. It's really bad. I've heard that you will help any of us you can. There's a doctor that is doing experimental work in this type of cancer and approach. I can't get him. My doctors can't get to him, et cetera. And I've got a clock that is not going to last very long. Well, I called the doctor up. It shocked him that I called. I shared with him the case and I said, I know you've got still experimental and very early, but I'd very much appreciate it if you do this. And I waited and I thought he was probably going to turn me down. He said, you're the first leader that's ever called me to help with one of the young lady's completely cured. She did lose her leg from the knee down. Oddly enough, her name was Hope. Telling that story again and again about how do you hope, how you can help others. As I tell that to the young leaders, and I'll use the name of the company, ASAP. They're one of the top AI companies in the world, but only a couple hundred people. Gustavo's their CEO, a New Yorker by nature and background, and a fast learner. And he got strategy and vision, and he got clearly how to build a great leadership team. He has, if you can imagine, 55 PhDs of artificial intelligence. He can go against Google or Microsoft or Facebook or any of those players easily on it. And he's good with people, but he didn't get the cultural message. And he's a certain percentage is Russian, small, maybe 1/8 background. And I used to tease him about it. I understand, given your background, of course, that would upset him a little bit in a fun way. I just realized he probably wasn't going to focus on culture and strategy and vision, the team he got. And he said, for one meeting, he said, John, I want to review my meeting presentation for tomorrow with you. And I said, sure, because we do that a lot. He gave me a cultural presentation, which is the best I've ever seen. And boy, he'd done the work, and he was listening. I didn't think he was for quite a while. And in that meeting, a person listening to him lost a member of her family. And he went over after the meeting and the days following it, reached out to her and says, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. If it's none of my business, I understand, but what can I do to help? And I've been there. And he told the war stories about his own family, and then finished the conversation. She came up about a month later and said, you're the first leader in my career that ever made me feel like you cared about me. And I'll be loyal to ASAP for as long as you have me. That was worth its weight in gold. It's like a salesperson. If I could give the new salesperson their first order, I would. If you reinforce the behavior that you want to see from a brilliant young leader, and you tell the war stories. But he not only got it, but then it was lucky that we reinforced the play that we ran scored the touchdown. Sometimes it doesn't, even though it's the right play to run. So teaching those moments for me is what I do now. Is financial reward important? Yeah, because I love to win and measure the score at the end of the game, but I'm much more interested in creating number one and number two companies, culture, growing the head count. We created 10,000 millionaires at Cisco. I'm not sure a company's done that since before or after. That's back when $1 million could buy you a house in Silicon Valley. We could have kept most of that at the top. We didn't. We win as a team, we lose as a team.
One of the things that I know you're known for is offsite retreats with your leaders, with people that you work with. Yes. And I'm hopeful that we can do these again soon. And maybe there are some small pockets of these happening now, but there will be a time where these will come back. I'm certain of that. Yes. Can you share your framework and philosophy around taking people outside of the office, going offsite, whether it's fishing in Alaska or other places that you've taken people, why you do it and why others should do it too?
Well, I'm not sure they should take them fishing, because fishing is something, unless you have a personal interest in, is a little bit hard. I do it because the company doesn't pay for this. I pay for it out of my own pocket. So if I'm going to pay for it on leadership development, I'm going to go do something I have fun with. And I tell everybody that. And by the way, it's gender diverse. It's probably 60% males, 40% females who volunteer to go do this. And the group that's been fishing with me that now have transitioned to the next level, who have the core group of 10 or 12 people, have been with me for a decade and a half or 2 decades. I formed friendships for life, but they help me train these young CEOs when they go with me to Alaska. Now, why the offsite? The offsite allows you to develop relationships, to really get into conversations you don't get into otherwise. It will shock you how sometimes a manager of your team is having trouble with an employee, and they don't even know that the employee is going through a divorce, or that their child is sick with cancer, or that they just lost a parent they were very close to. And because they never build that in-depth relationship. And when a person has a problem at home, it always spills into work. When you have a problem at work, it always spills to the home. You build relationships of trust. And it doesn't change. Trust doesn't mean I'm going to be easier on you. In fact, I just lost one of my 2 very great friends out of Cisco, Rick Justice, in the last week, 17-year battle to cancer. But he and Larry Carter were my 2 cornerstones for Cisco, and for a large part of the time that we ran it there. But he knew, because he was close to me, my expectations of him would be even more than other leaders. And he knew if I had to, I would unfortunately let him go. And he had to overachieve. And we had that conversation in terms of the direction. So it is building that level of trust and expectations of winning, and treating other people like you like to be treated. And he was my perfect counterpart. He was very analytical, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Come on, Rick, hurry up. H, I, J, K, L, I'm going to be. Come on, Rick, get me to Z. I go A, B, C. But between us, we almost didn't miss. And you had Larry Carter, the CFO at that time, to it, who invented the virtual close. It was an unusual team, but we knew everything about each other. We knew the backgrounds. To your question, Alaska is a story that people remember, because when we go up there, we don't stand on the side of the river and throw it out there and have 100 anglers on both sides of you fishing. We go into the remote parts of Alaska. We fly in on pontoon planes. When we fish, the fishing is spectacular. But we also, as we do this, they get to see the outdoors, and I get to watch them around their peers. And when you're fishing with just one person for a day, you learn a lot about them. You have no choice. You're in the boat, or besides, you're with just the guide. And you get to see them under stress. I mean, the first time Gustavo, just using him as an example again, saw a true wild grizzly bear, not the ones that pose at the waterfall with the fish in their mouth for their people to take pictures of. I'm talking about the ones that might not have seen a human before. And they are big and powerful. And Gustavo, when he saw it, he said, "I've never been more scared in my life, nor more alive." And I was watching him from the background. If he did something dumb, I would clearly intervene, because bears are pretty predictable. And you can tell ahead of time both their nature, and you don't go between the mother bear and her cubs. They don't do that in any species. But the male bears, you don't look in the eye, you don't challenge them, and you give them the right of way. So I was behind him watching him, but I learned more about him in that 5 minutes, and then how he talked about it the whole evening. And in the evenings, we give toasts at dinner, and everybody knows I'll call on people spontaneously, and everybody get called on at least twice during the week for their toast. What did they learn? And what was the teaching moment, both for the people who've done it for a decade with me, and young CEOs who might be their first year there. So when I come out of that, my turnover at Cisco, my top leaders and people who went to Alaska, was almost zero. And just like I don't think there's a customer that I've ever sold to that I can't sell to now because of the trust, the relationship, and the track record with it. Same thing with leaders. Most every leader I have will follow me into battle, and actually enjoy going into battle together.
I love it. Do you have time for like two more?
Sure.
Okay. I want to first hit on the profession of selling. You talked about selling.
Yes.
My dad, it's in my DNA. It's what he grew up doing. He's written books about it. It was my first jobs. I think we're all in sales every day, regardless if you have a quota or carry a bag. My first job after I got done playing football was a cubicle telephonic
What position
sales
do you
job.
play in football?
Quarterback.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the athlete who's also a thinking person.
Yes. Yeah. I think some of my linemen would give you a run for their money too. And my brother played linebacker. He had to call the plays too. So we both called the plays, just on different sides of the ball. But
I learned on that, because what you did so smoothly that people might have missed, you gave credit to your line, because they're the ones that open the holes. They're the one that protect you and keep you from getting blindsided. Left tackle is the one who's got your back all the time. And you talk about their achievement is the way a great quarterback does it. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, I love my guys. I still have our O-line domination sweatshirts that I handed out when we had dinners in high school to my guys, and tried to do the same in college, because it is a great learning for life, in the fact that I can't do anything without those guys, and I needed them. I loved them. I still love them. I just had lunch with one of them 2 weeks ago, in fact, of my high school offensive lineman, and we just, it's just so great to reminisce. But anyways, you got me off track for a second. I'm talking about the profession of selling, and it means a lot to me. That was a tough job. I was cold calling 70, 80 calls a day, a lot of rejection. Sometimes you go 0 for 70. It's tough, but you figure some things out. You fight through adversity. You learn about how to bring your solution to solve a problem. And you realize that sales is not the used car guy or the person trying to pawn something off on you that you don't need, but it's really a noble profession that is needed. And I want people to be good at it, and I want people to value it. I know that's something you're very good at. Could you share kind of your thoughts on the profession of selling and why it's so important for people, I think, I mean, Dan Pink has written about this, a lot of people have written about it, but why it's so important that people understand sales and it's worth it for them to study it, to get better at it, regardless of their job title.
So sales is an art, and your dad clearly understood that, and you learned well from him and the approach. And I start with certain basic issues. I learned to connect with people because of the dyslexia. It just taught me how to do that and taught me how to be comfortable with uncomfortable topics like what's working in your life and what's not. And it will shock leaders when I ask that question about candor. I'm going to digress for a second, but with King Abdullah of Jordan, who's a very good friend, and Queen Rania, unbelievably smart first lady, very, very sharp. And the first time they invited me to their new palace, the queen was pregnant, and I broached a topic that probably was borderline. And I said, "Are you going to go through the delivery with Queen Rania?" And it shocked them both that I'd ask. And then before they said anything, I said, "You better. It will be one of the neatest moments of your life, Ab, in terms of relationships, etc. on it." So I tend to deliberately get the tough issues out on the table, lessons from Jack Welch, etc. Now, to your question specifically about selling, we all are in sales. You can be the president of the United States. You can be a first line manager. You can be a doctor. How you interface to your clients and how you do that with complete transparency and honesty and trust, which is something we need some lessons on in our political world. But the ability to connect and only sell people what they really need, to read them, do they really want the brutal truth if you're a doctor on how tough things are or not? And you learn how to read and identify what does that mean. Sales is a way of connecting what you're asking a person to do with really meeting the outcomes they want to see in life. And so every person, doesn't matter if you're the doctor, the lawyer, the person at the front door of a hotel chain, etc. I'm always connecting with them and learning from them. And you learn from everybody, as you said. And I was teasing you about the offensive linemen. Those were often the valedictorian of some of the classes on it. But it is the ability to learn from that. And you've got to get used to rejection. And then you teach people how to get used to rejection. Like you said, cold calls, I didn't do 70 a day, but some days I'd do 10 or 15. And I'd often do it by driving straight up to the company and saying, and I'm from IBM, I'd like to talk to your team about it. One day, just nothing went right. I mean, nothing went right. And I went to one of the companies and I said, have you all got a computer system yet? And they said no. And I said, well, can I talk to the CIO? And they said no, the chief information officer, we just fired him. We don't need him. I mean, that was how bad my day was. And then I went to my favorite customer, and I'd never gotten a cancellation of an order in my life. And I went to that favorite customer because I needed reinforcement of positive. They gave me a cancellation letter. I was just whipped. And Ryan, you know where I'm going. I went out, I drove 45 minutes home. I thought the day couldn't have been any worse. And then I got lightened up because there was a truck in front of our house, and it was our first house. And they were delivering the couch that my wife and I stretched to be able to buy. And I said, this is going to end on a great day. So I pulled up behind the truck. I got out. And as I got out, the truck suddenly started to back up. And I realized he didn't see me or the car. I yelled at him. He still didn't see me. The truck was backing up more. It was a big truck. I jumped in the car, honked the horn, still didn't hear me. I threw it in reverse, and that truck ran up and over my hood and totaled my car.
What a day.
And you know what? They were at the wrong house. It wasn't even my couch. Now, sales, you got to bounce back, and you got to laugh at that, because you either cry and you feel sorry for yourself, or you deal with the world the way it is and say, tomorrow will be better. You're the quarterback. You just threw 2 interceptions. You cost your team the game. You know you did. You knew you let down your lineman. But you have to have the courage to say, I'm going to make that next shot. I asked Steph Curry, one of the greatest basketball players, I think, in history, definitely the best three-point shooter ever. I said, do you think that shot's going to go in every time? He said, yeah, and it will. And he believes it. And it is that confidence that if he misses 4 in a row, he believes that 5th shot's going to go in. And the coach wants him to shoot that 5th one. Mm-hmm. So a lot of lessons learned in what we just covered.
So good, John. One more question. There's a lot of younger people listening earlier in their career, and I know you get peppered with advice questions, and that's what this is general pieces of life advice that you've picked up from others, a few nuggets that you'd say, hey, these are people who are solid, growth-oriented, want to leave their mark, make a positive contribution for others, help other people, right? What are some general pieces of advice you pass along to that person?
Never compromise your values. You'll regret it. True business, politics, any profession you want. Live by them and walk the talk. Secondly, how you handle your setbacks, your defeats, your mistakes are as important and probably more than your successes, although none of us like to talk about our mistakes. Third, back to the example of why I got the job at Cisco. Treat people like you like to be treated yourself. That golden rule, it serves you well, and it will again and again and again. I can build relationships with the Prime Minister Modi or in India or President Macron of France because I treat them like I like to be treated myself, and I bring value to them in terms of the alternatives on it. And one lesson that I still work on, and I still have room for improvement, I occasionally take life too serious. You need to be able to focus and deal with rejections, as you said earlier, mistakes. But most of us are better when we're relaxed and we teach others how to do it. Many of the young leaders I'm coaching now, when I see them under too much stress, I'll deliberately pull them aside and let them know that they're Tom Cruise. I don't know if you saw it, Last Samurai, when he was learning how to be a samurai, the top swordsman in the village who was teaching him was beating him badly every single time up with just three blocks. And his friend that he had developed there said, too many thoughts. Too many thoughts in your mind. As a leader, you want to get your thoughts, prioritize carefully, and then execute on them. And almost none of us are as effective when we overthink things and we take it too serious. In fact, I'd argue that usually causes us to make mistakes.
Wow, John, thank you so much, truly, for investing so much of your time. I know we went a little bit over, but I'm really grateful for you and your entire team who have been just so wonderful to work with the past few months as we were preparing for this. And I will tell you, man, I set pretty high expectations for you because I've studied a lot of your work, and you somehow still find a way to exceed them. So just want to say thank you, truly. I really appreciate it. I'd love to continue our dialogue as we both progress, because I'm, like you, believe that relationships are everything, and that's what makes life awesome.
Well, Ryan, I accept your kind offer. We agreed at the beginning, however, you would tell me one area I needed to improve on. And for all of you, if you're still listening on this, you can't see Ryan, but he just shook his head and put his hands over his eyes on it. But you've got to constantly improve and reinvent yourself. So I'd like to know from my team and from others, what is one area that you think I could have done better in this show? Not as a negative, but it's like a sports team. I want to make every play like a Jerry Rice running the pattern. He did it to perfection for the 49ers in football. What's one area that I could do better on, or an area that I might want to work on?
Do you want me to go first, or Mackenzie, or Shannon, or another member of your team?
First. I'll get the others after the session.
Well, I was trying to get them to go because I don't have one, but I will. You saw me taking notes the entire time. So, I actually hate doing this, but I'll tell you, the story about Gustavo and the culture section.
Yes.
You mentioned, I've heard that before. I've read about it. I don't know if I heard or read about it. I feel like in a way you wanted to tell the story, and you again, this is awkward for me, but you wanted to tell a story, but you kind of squeezed it in there because you've told it before, yet the listener has never heard it before. So in a way, I would have wanted maybe more context around, well, what does he mean? Because he said Gustavo, oh, is a culture presentation. Wait, what? So I think in a way, because I'm guessing you've told the story before. Sometimes when I tell a story and it's been told many times, I leave out some of the context of it because I feel like, oh, they don't need to hear that. Well, but everyone listening, it's the first time they've ever heard that story. So just in general, it's something that I think you're actually really good at, is setting the stage and the context for your stories that are memorable. But that was like the one instance that I wrote a note right here to say that actually, I think there's a fuller, more context to the Gustavo culture presentation that we didn't necessarily get.
Gotcha. And for Mackenzie and Shannon, who are taking notes as well at the other end, I think that's a very good one, because you not only said that was a story I didn't complete as tightly, you understood why I didn't, because I have told that so many times
Yes.
on it. And it's one that I'm thinking, if you've heard Ryan or your audience has heard, I need to make it tighter, add a little bit of value, but not to bore them for hearing the story again. That goes back to really knowing your audience, but also being able to do it very well. So Shannon, you've got the ball on that. Mackenzie, we'll have the other sessions, because often when people give constructive criticism, you praise in public, you criticize in private. I'll have them give me the feedback afterwards, so we can get you back on schedule. And I'm late for my next call as well, but I wanted that feedback from you. Ryan, it was a joy. You made me work, which I love. You hit a couple questions in ways that I'd never been asking before. Shannon, you saw that, and Mackenzie, you saw it, and team on it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was one of my favorites. Sorry to interrupt, but it was one of my favorites. I really, really enjoyed it. John, you were fantastic, and Ryan, I think you asked such good questions and probed on certain questions and got a little bit deeper. And I heard more detail on some of the stories than I've ever heard before. So I really enjoyed that.
Me too.
Team, we'll connect afterwards. I've got to get on that next session, which I'm late for. And Ryan, it was a very, very good interview. Don't let it go to your head.
Thank you, guys. It was so great. Awesome. All right. We'll see you soon. All you Mo with you guys. Okay.
We'll
see you guys. Okay.